Get away, Jeff. Now politics is coming. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about Prop 1, speaking of the constitutional amendments. Prop 1 on the ballot is the constitutional right to farm and ranch. Every time I say this in our neck of the woods, I feel kind of silly, really. I mean, it's crazy to me that we're voting on the constitutional right to farm and ranch in the state of Texas. It's nuts, but that's the world we live in. We'll tell you a little bit about why. All right, so this amendment went through the House and the Senate. It passed unanimously. Senator Perry from Lubbock and Dwayne Burns was the representative that really carried the legislation. Rarely does anything go through our legislature or any legislature in this day and time and pass unanimously. So that's a pretty big feat in and of itself. Okay, so we think this is a historic opportunity to pass this legislation. Why is that important? Other states have tried. Oklahoma tried 4 or 5 years ago, and it failed. Crazy. Went through the legislature in Oklahoma. I heard the number 85%, but it was a high pass rate in their legislature as well. They thought it's Oklahoma. That's all we do. It's rural. It'll pass. It didn't pass. All these organizations came out against it, spent a lot of money, and it failed. So we don't want that to happen here. All right. So this is the language that'll be on the ballot. Very simple. And it's Prop 1 before everybody gets tired. The constitutional amendment protecting the right to engage in farming, ranching, timber production, horticulture, and wildlife management. So it can't be much simpler than that. There's what will be in the Constitution if it does pass. Again, pretty simple. The people have the right to engage in generally accepted farm, ranch, timber production, horticulture, or wildlife management practices on real property you own or lease. Again, pretty simple.
If I could say something about that generally accepted, since we're in an agri-life facility here. Generally accepted practices, legislation, the burden to come up with those is on Texas Agri-Life Extension Service. Now, I don't know.
For the department is helpful some, so.
So I don't know if you have them already as agri-life, we've got to start from scratch.
They've been complaining about it, but I have not seen them.
So they're working on it, they're complaining, they're working on it.
I've been working on it already because I think it's going to pass. We hope.
That's the general, or that's the umbrella under which generally accepted practices will be defined for this constitutional amendment.
One other note I heard on that from a meeting that happened a little farther downstate last week. Somebody said, well, does that mean if this passes, we can grow marijuana? No, it does not. Generally accepted. So that is not the case. Not yet. All right. So normal day-to-day practices. All of our family farms and ranches, large or small. That's what a lot of people don't understand about what we do in agriculture. Corporate farm is not necessarily a big evil company. It's a family farm or ranch. This is a pretty big number. Why is this important? Why are we trying to get ahead of this? Between 97 and 2017, over 2 million acres of ag land was lost just in our state. By 2043, we'll add another 13 million people, depending on whose guess you want to. Mr. Fisher may have a better number than that, but I've been hearing for years. We're adding 1,000 to 1,500 people a day. Is that still ballpark? I mean, it's crazy. And where are those people coming from? Some places we don't necessarily agree with politically. All right, we have constitutional rights to protect us from protect the minority from the majority. We are definitely the minority. Farmers and ranchers are less than 2% of the population. So we need to be protected, but when you boil this down in a nutshell, it's not just about protecting farmers and ranchers. It's about protecting our food security or our food. Again, it's activist organizations that have come out against this. I don't know if they spent a lot of money in Texas yet. Early voting starts on the 23rd, so I'm guessing you're probably going to see some stuff. Even if they spend a lot of money, will we see that here? Maybe not so much as if you go to the Metroplex or Houston, you know, those places, that's where they're going to spend the money. That's where the majority of the votes are. Right, there's been a lot of regulations come out even in our state. So California's passed some crazy legislation, Prop 12. I don't know, y'all probably heard about that. Kind of decimated the confined animal feeding operations in that state. Oregon, Washington State, even Colorado has tried to pass laws that are just kind of crazy in my point of view. I think most of us would probably think that. But even in this state, cities have started passing ordinances that just don't make sense. As cities encroach upon agricultural production land, they pass laws that says grass can't be more than 8 inches high. They've actually gone out and mowed down people's hay crops before they're ready to harvest because the grass is too tall. We don't need that corn crop anymore. It's all dried out. That haven't been harvested yet. So they really just don't know.
The backside of this. We've got the arrows on the front, tells you a little bit about the legislation. I was asked one of the first or second presentations that I did on this. No, these are not scenarios or made up, these are real deals. Okay,
That's happening in Texas, if you can believe that.
and my favorite's the last one, when you get to that.
Sometimes I read that one, sometimes I don't, but it's kind of interesting to read. I don't know if y'all can see it or not, but. This one was passed. It says it's unlawful for a person having under his control any male large animal livestock capable of breeding to allow to associate or stand with female large livestock. Except when done so in a structure or building sufficiently enclosed on all sides or in all parts so as to completely close off and prevent all outside view. That's the world we're living in, people. I mean, it's crazy. Still blows my mind.
Our communications department, after the first, I think they printed them first, but they took the cities off to pass these ordinances, I guess, to protect against these, so that we all wouldn't go call a certain town, city council or.
Go throw rocks at the. All right, so what does this legislation do? It prevents regulatory overreach, requires clear and convincing evidence of an imminent danger. So it must prove that it's gonna happen, not that it might happen. It's gotta prove that it will happen for them to do it. It doesn't prevent a nuisance claim. But why is that important? So courts in the last several years, they've made it really hard to fight these ordinances. I mean, and you think about most of our producers who don't have the money or the time to go to court, pay lawyers and try to fight these things. So we're really trying to get out in front of this before it gets worse. It's not going to regulate animal abuse. We don't want that. Any danger to animal health or crop production, such as diseases like brucellosis, boll weevil, citrus canker, that sort of thing. It's still going to be regulated like water. Chemical use is federally regulated, so all that stuff's still going to be under that. It's still going to be regulated. It doesn't take away all regulation. Basically, we just need to get our folks out to vote for Proposition 1. And I tell everybody I'll talk to, like Todd said earlier, I have the eastern side of the panhandle. I can't really imagine very many people looking at this and voting against it. What I do worry about is our people getting out to vote. We've got to get this information out. We've got to go vote. If you look at Ted Cruz's last election, what saved him in that election? The rural vote. So the Houston Chronicle has come out against this legislation, and they have a mayoral race on the ballot. So one of these organizations could go in there and spend several $1 million and really impact this election, especially if their turnouts abnormally high for a constitutional amendment election. Because in most of the state, only thing on the ballot is those 14 amendments. Historically, the turnout for those is really low, but we've got to get our folks to get out to vote for it. So tell everybody you know to go vote for it. Early voting starts on October the 23rd, and then election day is November the 7th. Hopefully you'll start seeing these signs pop up. We're going to scatter them all around. We've got some big 4-8s that are going to start going up. These yard signs will start going up. We'll probably have them at the polling places.
We don't have any sandwich boards, but we can make them if you need a job on this. Put you to work. October 23rd is not far away. Early voting starts at that point.
He'll be here quick. That's about all I've got. Unless y'all have questions.
The right to farm, you may hear from the opposition, this kind of some bubbling we've heard. We haven't seen any polling, but those animal rights group environmentalists, well, got some deep pockets, but they're probably gonna, you may hear the phrase right to farm. It's all about big corporate farms that can poison the land and water and some of you know the monster. It's been pretty quiet so far, at least out here, but we don't know what's coming.
I wondered about that. I know that it didn't pass in Oklahoma, right?
Correct.
Was it mostly those anti-agriculture groups or?
They spent Fisher has inside.
Yeah.
It's like $6 million only get the dollars. This is a
Huh.
These are organizations that they're very poor. They don't even think you can have a dog as a pet. That's how heart crazy they are, in my opinion.
Well, no, a lot of our economists in the more urban areas have struggled with some really weird questions lately about, grass is violating cities, hay is violating cities' grass ordinance. The hay or the corn gets ugly, it's time to harvest it, it turns all brown, they want it plowed up, and so, I mean, stuff that doesn't make sense.
Too much dust during corn harvest.
Too much dust in the corn.
They showed up.
Yeah,
This is all where we were doing this before the city got there, but now since the city's there. They want you to.
well, the city signed the residents a lot, so, I mean, not a lot, but it's gonna happen, so.
We think this is a downstate problem, but we have had an issue even between here and Canyon 2 or 3 years ago now. The story I remember is the guy's neighbor was out of town, his field was blowing, so he goes to scratch his field to keep it from blowing. Somebody turned him into NLS and TCEQ for out there plowing on a windy day, making the dirt low, when you, in reality, he was trying to stop dirt. That's even here.
Yeah, I got guys talking about Random County feed yard, and that's being, that land around it, 10 acres, and you say your head. If you get on the wrong side of the feed yard with a prevailing southwest wind all summer, you might not be real happy that you built there, and so then are the complaints gonna start, and I mean.
Well, and
It can be here.
there was complaints a couple of years ago, a lady in the neighborhood that lived north of us. For the trucks driving up and down the road, train corn and silage harvest,
Sure.
because her children play in that road and there should not be semis there. And I'm like, well, your kids probably shouldn't be in the road, you could have a yard. But, I mean, the rule of fit. And was calling all the farmers around, chewing their butts.
Thank you for the opportunity. Well, yes, on top one.
Thank y'all for dinner, we appreciate it. Yeah.
Yep.
Our next speaker is gonna be Mark Fisher, he is the co-director of the A&M College Center. He was also the chief economist for the U.S. House Ag Committee for what, 9 years?
8.5, yep.
Yeah, we'll round up, so, anyway, Mark's definitely your ag policy expert, and Joe Outlaw will say he is, but I'm gonna say you are, because we got the room.
I like to say I'm the younger, better looking, smarter version of Joe Outlaw, so.
Way more humble.
Yeah, and even despite saying all of that, still one.
I'll turn it over.
I love Joe, so well, no, it's great to be with all of you. Well, I didn't want to note too, I have my bodyguard I'm traveling with back there at the back of the room, Corbin, my nephew is traveling with me this week. Learning about Farmville, so they live in Oklahoma where I grew up. He won the Oklahoma FFA Creek competition and competes in the national competition. It's the 2nd of November. So he's learning about Farmville with Uncle Bart this week. So give Corbin a hard time. I'm glad that happened with you. So it is great to be here. I want this to be very, very, very informal, please. I would love myself talk. So I'd love to have a conversation with you all. So otherwise, I'm going to talk for 45 minutes. So it's much better if y'all stop me along the way, ask questions. I did grow up on a farm. I was the 5th generation to grow up on Operation Corbin. And my boys and young daughter are the 6th. Obviously, we wouldn't have got to that point without some very strong women who are very intimately involved in that operation. Including one of those, my grandmother's still alive, drives up until recently drove wheat truck every summer. Grandmother on the other side worked in the field my entire life. Ended up losing a child in that process. My mother's brother ended up falling off the tractor when we were young. And so we just have a litany of, like many other farm families, litany of experiences. It's certainly part of who I am. I don't live on the farm full time, but I still am heavily involved back home in part because I'm working on policy. I have a pretty strong bias to making sure I know what impact it's having, at a farm level. And so I grew up in southwestern Oklahoma. Long story short, ended up doing a PhD at A&M. I did get a call to go to Washington to help write the 2014 and 2018 farm bills. So Mr. Lucas, the chairman, who wrote the 14 farm bills from Western Oklahoma. Long story short, there too, we ended up getting linked up, and he ended up offering me the job. So I had interned there as an undergrad. I was at the state thinking I'd want to end my career there, and lo and behold, they gave me my dream job while I was a grad student at Texas A&M University College Station. And so wrote the 14 farm bill, ended up finishing my PhD remotely, got married, had 3 little kids along the way. Chairman Conaway, who I think many of you will know, he's from Midland. he became chairman, had the good fortune of staying on with him as his deputy cap director and chief economist, and helped write the 18 Farm Bill. And after that, it was time to get the heck out of Dodge. And so we left DC in September 19. Left to move back to Texas, and as he mentioned, I work alongside Joe. So Joe and I are the director of the IT Policy Center. He teaches the fall ag policy class, so he's teaching this semester. I teach 190 bright, shiny faces in the spring in ag, undergrad ag and food policy. So if you're not familiar with it, just very quickly about what our center does, because I often find, like back in Texas, we work all over the country, but even folks in Texas aren't necessarily knowing what we do. So one of the reasons I wanted to do my PhD there is because the thing the Ag and Food Policy Center, Texas A&M cares about is the farm level impact policy. How do the decisions in Washington affect farmers and ranchers out on the ground? That's, if I didn't care about that and wasn't working on that, I would be sitting on a horse or in a tractor, because I love farming. But I have this unique opportunity to do this stuff, and A&M is the place nationwide. So we work across the entire country, but we do it all from College Station. We worked on, our center worked on every farm bill for the last 40 years. We've been around, this is our 40th year. So we were established back in '83. We look at it, as I mentioned, impact of policy on farmers and ranchers, but we also get called on by Congress to look at all sorts of other stuff too. But our bread and butter is looking at impacts on farms and ranches. And the main people we work for are the ag committees of Congress. So what I used to work at, Dee Dee's colleague, another West Texan who used to work here, Dr. Benavides, some of y'all may know Justin. Justin is actually in my old job. So he went to DC.
If he was not, I am now the adjustments. Why y'all still live?
Thank you. But Justin's up there working right now on what we think, I mean, everybody's calling it, maybe trying to like make the chances that pretty low. So whatever number it ends up being, he's working on that one. So I have a sense of what all he's having to go through right now, but the ag committees are where we work. And I realize there's a whole breadth of different experiences across the room. I have no idea who knows what and who doesn't. So forgive me if some of it's too basic or if some of it's too much in the weeds. I'm trying to kind of shoot the middle on some of this. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with DC, you have this House and Senate Ag Committee. The leadership there right now. So on the House side, Republicans are in charge. The chairman is G.P. Thompson, Congressman Thompson from Pennsylvania. He was our vice chairman working under Mr. Conway. He's been in West Texas several times, including here recently. And so he's made a point to get out of the country side. His counterpart from the Democrats, the ranking member is David Scott, the first African-American chairman, who's now ranking member of the committee. He's from Georgia. So they're on the House side. Over on the Senate side, you have Debbie Stabenow. Democrats are in charge of the Senate. So you have Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan. She's the chairwoman of the committee. She's been around a long time. This is her last farm bill. She's announced that she's not running for re-election. So this farm bill is her last farm bill, which in the back of your mind start thinking, I bet she probably wants to get farm bill done. And if you start to look at what we're seeing in the press right now, I think it's reflective of that. She's a short timer, wants to get this thing done. Her counterpart is John Bozeman, from senator from Arkansas. Who used to be a House member, was good friends with my old vice chairman Conway. He's now the ranking member on the Senate side. If you look across all of those, though, the House and Texas presidency is not much. Fortunately, we have Adam Jackson back, he's on the committee now, but no one really waiting in the weeds in terms of leadership. It's something we keep a close eye on. We're so we had Charlie, we had Larry Combest, we had Mike Conn, we had all of these titans and policy. You have leadership positions, but we don't really have anybody in West Texas that's kind of taking that route. If y'all want to talk about that stuff, we can, but that gives you a lay of the land. Those are the people we work for. Almost all of our work is on the Republican side. It's for they tend to be the ones that are more focused on rural America. So we do a lot from John Bozeman in Arkansas. We do a lot from G.P. Thompson in Pennsylvania. And as I mentioned, we worked on every farm bill since '85. To give you a little taste of the stuff we're working on, I'll tell you right now, most of the stuff we're working on never sees the light of day. You've done a ton of work for the House and Senate, and everything you do is confidential. If they don't want it published, it goes in a drawer, which is weird for a university, because universities like publishing stuff, right? And so a lot of what we do never sees the light of day, just finds us. We would much rather have a seat at the table and be influential on all of your collective behalves. So it doesn't matter to us if it ends up not being published. Right now, a lot of it is not not getting published. But, last couple of years, we did a lot of work on, the huge run up in costs last year. That was one of the biggest criticisms of the safety net, is that it didn't keep up with cost of production. We did a couple of reports on that. Another one we've been hugely involved in is in COVID, where you saw that divergence between farm gate prices and retail prices for cattle. And you heard all the concerns, the renewed concerns about the packers, all of that stuff. We got stuck in the very middle of that very season. We ended up writing a book on it on the left, and then 2 reports we did over on the Senate side. And so we were heavily involved in that, even the farm policy book. So we work on a whole lot of stuff. And I think by virtue of me being back down in College Station, I know all of these people still, my old college working with Capitol Hills, and they know to call the center. And so we get pulled into a lot of debate. We get pulled into tax debates. Anything that affects ag, we get pulled into, which is okay with me. The other thing that I'll mention, not to belabor this anymore, is the last line of what we do, is the analysis that we do on farm policy. So whether it's crop insurance, whether it's traditional farm policy, if y'all are familiar with things like Arkin PLC, we work on all of those things, and we use what we call representative farms. And so in all of those locations all over the country, 30 different states, we've got 94 farms in 30 different states. In every single one of those locations, we work with a panel of real life producers, typically 4 to 6, and we have a pretty big team that's constantly on the road. They go every 2 years to meet with these panelists. And they essentially create a virtual farm in that location, and they build financial statements, they build machinery complements, cropping mixes, own versus lease land, all of that we would need to be able to simulate for financial statements. And so we can do that on all these farms across the country. So when Congress says, hey, if we raise the reference price on seed cotton from 36.7 cents to 38.5, what's the impact going to be? We can run it through giant models we maintain on campus and give a sense across the entire country what the impact. So it's a pretty powerful tool. We're the only one in the country who has it, which kind of gives us a front row seat and follows the process, which is pretty unique and pretty cool for Texas to have that capability. So with that, to shift gears a little bit, talk about Farm Bill. I won't ask for a show of hands. If all of you are Farm Bill experts in the room, you can let me know after. I won't put anybody on the spot to confess that they're not. And if you are, you can tell me I wasted your time afterwards. Just a couple of slides for background on what's actually in it. And you'll see this slide here in just a second again. I am a budget guy. I'm an economist. I'm an econ professor at A&M. So of course I like budget charts. But the main thing here to note, and not to get totally wonky on you after dinner when you're starting to get sleepy and it's getting close to bedtime. The maroon is discretionary spending. Okay, so these are the things. If the 2 breakdowns, the biggest breakdowns are maroon and the gray. Black is interest. We're going to pay a whole lot of interest on the debt we owe. And this is getting worse as interest rates rise, right? But the other major pots of spending are the maroon and the gray. The maroon is discretionary. Anybody heard of appropriators, the appropriations committees? That's what they do. It's decided every single year. Okay, so they go through this process every year. It's the stuff that needs to be prioritized on an annual basis. They do that. That's the maroon. It's about 1/4 of the federal government is discretionary spending. Half of that is defense. So for the defense budget, every single year, we go through a defense appropriations process and an authorization process to figure out what we're going to spend on defense. Does that make sense? Probably so, right? Because it depends on what wars we're waging, right? And we're going through that right now. I have a feeling the leadership of Congress, what do you think they're fixated on now? I mean, the fight we just had with the speaker blew up this maroon pie, blew it up over the annual appropriations bills. A big part of that was over border spending, another part was over Ukraine. Now why do you think they're hair on fire to get a speaker confirmed? Because Hamas just went, flew the smithereens out of it, right? So now, so politics constantly changing. I'm doing 3 more of these, and everybody wants the slides days and imagine like, well, I'll send it to you, but it literally changes. That's the one thing I love about policy, changes every single day. And all this stuff impacts the Farm Bill process. So anyway, this is the stuff decided annually. The gray is mandatory spending. Why in the world am I boring you at 6:30 in the evening on things like mandatory spending? Why? Because that's really what Farm Bill focuses. The appropriations committees do the appropriation stuff. The authorizing committees like the Ag Committee, the budget they work with is mandatory spending. That is all of the gray. Okay, and so 2/3 of the federal budget is mandatory spending. It's called mandatory. Have you ever heard the term entitlement spending? You ever wonder where it came from? Or know where someone want to volunteer where it came from? Why is it called entitlement spending or mandatory? Congress, one of the authorizing committees, they write the rules. And if you qualify, you're entitled to the payment. Okay? So for example, they write the rules on CRP. You sign up for a CRP contract, you're entitled to get paid, right? We write the rules of PLC, the price loss coverage program. If market price falls, you're entitled to a payment, right? If you meet all the other criteria and you sign your contract, right? So they're entitlement program because Congress is, it's not, I mean, it's decided once for however long it's authorized, and then you're entitled to the payment if you qualify. Okay, so against that backdrop, then if you look at the farm bill, this was the last one. In terms of what is actually in a farm bill, Justin right now in DC is very much focused on this part. This is the mandatory spending. And again, we're still just a tiny sliver. I'll show, that's why you're gonna see the pie chart again. When we get close to the talking about budget, chaos going on in DC. But these are the 12 titles of the bill and the mandatory spending associated with it. And the bar charts there, hopefully to help things jump out at you, because there's 12. But how many of them have the lion's share of spending? 2 or 3 of them, right? I mean, the biggest one by far, and I'm guessing most of you know this, SNAP. SNAP is under the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee. It falls under a farm bill. In this bill, it made up 77% of the bill. In the next bill, it's gonna make up 83%.
Wow. Continually increasing that?
Yep, and I'll show you, when I get to the chart that shows the top 4 here in a little bit under the new baseline, remind me to bring that back up again, because it matters. And we'll talk about how I actually got to that point. But beyond that, you have farm policy, and in this bucket, I put Title I. So things like ARC, PLC, any cotton growers in the room? A few. Marketing loan, if you put your cotton in the loan, 52-cent loan rate, the old school 52-cent loan rate marketing loan, that's under Title I of the bill. So traditional farm policy goes under Title I of the bill. Title 11 down here is crop insurance. So I put the 2 of them together under farm policy. Beyond that, then you have conservation at about 60 million. That is EQIP, CRP, CSP, RCPP, ASEP, the EQIP program. All of those things fit under Title II of the farm bill. And I think someone, is Christina talking about, she'll talk about programs. They're gonna go into the details of programs behind these. Mainly, you think of FSA here and you think of NRCS here on Title II, okay? But then when you look beyond that, there's a whole lot of stuff in a farm bill that other people care about. But it's not really, I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but politicians get in trouble for saying that it's pencil dust, but up against a total price tag for that bill of $867 billion. When you're talking about millions, it doesn't even register as a decimal point, right? Which is part of the problem in Washington, but it's also the reality. And so you look at all these other provisions, they're pretty small. The next one in line is trade. There's virtually nothing there that's grower based. But I would argue pretty darn important for y'all. For one, how much of our cotton do we export? Anyone want to venture a guess? What share of cotton do we export? Put the students over there on me. Anybody know how much roughly? Ballpark, it changes every year. 75%, we export 75% of the cotton we grow, right? So trade, despite the fact no one likes WTO and all this other stuff, trade's pretty darn important to agriculture. Right? A third of the revenue in ag comes from trade, from exports. Okay. You think, well, what about us? I'm a cattle guy. What about cattle? What percentage do we export? And by LA, we grow the best beef in the world, don't we? Well, how much of the rest of the world is enjoying our good beef?
Well, at the Southwest Cattle Race meeting in Western launch, South Korea, China, Japan,
Absolutely. And you know what share of the beef we raise, what share gets exported?
I want to say 6.
I've heard a couple of instances of 60, 10 to 12. Really small. So and people don't like talking about trade, but to me it's very important because like 3 or 4% of the bellies on the planet reside inside the borders of our country. Everybody else is outside. And once your disposable income starts to go, what do you want to buy? Really good tasting US beef, right? And so this insular nonsense of like only focused on our country is crazy for agriculture because all of the consumers live outside of our country, right? So the opportunity to expand that is huge. And so I only mention it because then you've got trade title. What do they focus on? MAP, Market Access Program, FMD, Foreign Market Development Program. It's our efforts that we have to infiltrate other countries marketing US product, and we do that through USDA support. So trade missions that you'll see people going on, overseas offices like US Wheat Associates that have offices overseas, NCBA work that's done overseas, a lot of it is done with work out of that trade title. So there's these three buckets over here get all the attention because that's where all the money is. It's the money that goes either to consumers or to producers, but a lot of this other stuff is pretty instrumental. One of them that gets glossed over is down here at the bottom, miscellaneous, 2.4 billion. A lot of that was investment in livestock. I don't have much of this presentation on livestock. I know I got a lot of livestock people in the room, so I'm gonna take a brief detour to hit on this. Because in that bill, that's when we funded the foot and mouth vaccine bank. So there's a few $100 million part of the miscellaneous out of the 18th bill to help build the vaccine bank for FMD. There's other funding in there for disease surveillance and preparedness and prevention. Another one that was outside of this bill, but who knows what's going on in the cattle markets right now? Where are prices?
Very
One word to describe prices. Pleasant, historic, crazy, whatever you want, whatever you want to use, right? Pretty high prices. Anybody hear about things like LRP? And I know Rachel's gonna be in one of these here in a few sessions from now, talking about insurance, including cattle. But I hear all the time, cattle guy, and again, that comes with family ranchers too. So, what do you cattle guys want from the government? What do you want from the government? Come on, say it out loud. What do you want from the government? Well, but not, but what's the old school answer to this? You want anything? You don't want anything from the government. And you want what? Leave us alone. With a few other choice words, because the problem is there is quite a bit. You have farm bill for cattle producers, and they don't like necessarily admit it, but it's there. I mean, one of my biggest projects I worked on in the 14 bill was LFP. Anybody familiar with LFP? That's another one that FSA administers, livestock forage program, help offset the cost of feed during drought. We wrote that program in 14. Mainly, Mr. Lucas came to me and said, it died a year early in the 08 farm bill. And then plus we're at 14, there's 3 years lapse. He came to me like, what are we gonna do about this? Or more was came to me and said, go figure out what we're gonna do about this. And so we came to him and we said, we're gonna have to cut elsewhere to come up with 3.5 billion. And he's like, and I want it permanently paid for. I don't want any of this nonsense at the end of it, let it, disappear again. So we made it retroactive, put it permanently in place at 3.5 billion. It's ended up spending more than that in Texas alone, between the two. Over the drought, 4-year drought in the last 2 years that we've had have been a significant future. Another one that related to these high prices. Have anybody heard about LRP, livestock risk protection, new insurance product? I see more than a handful of grins in the room, which suggests to me you might have an LRP product underlying some of your prices, potentially. In following Hurricane Harvey, cotton was out of the farm bill, out of the 14 farm bill, no longer covered commodity. Our focus had been on trying to get it with Mr. Conway and trying to get back in. Following Hurricane Harvey, the bipartisan Flood Act in 2018 passed, and it was a vehicle that restored the safety net for cotton. Why are you bringing that up now? Because one other line in that bill, historically, the risk management agency, it's the USDA agency that oversees crop insurance, cannot spend more than $20 million a year on livestock policies. Why? It was just in there. And so we just took that in that bill, struck it. And the response has been pretty. So in 2018, that 20 million a year insured about 500 million in liability for livestock. What do you think we're insuring this year? So I realize this isn't my classroom. I'll ask some questions. So what do you think? How much? 500 million in 18.
I don't know, it's much. So I'm an insurance agent, that's right.
Okay.
It's like 89% of this. Our LRP says sky. I can't think.
So I'll give you a hint, it's in the billions, so it started at 500 million 5 years ago, there's 22, where was it? Someone give me a number. Started at 500 million, what was the liability insured in 22?
2 billion.
Order of magnitude higher, and you'll be spot on. $22 billion. 4,000% increase in liability insurance. Right, and so you have livestock growers have considerably more tools at your disposal now for risk management than you did prior. From LFT to things like LRP. There, just this week, a new product, the weed cap product, was developed by Winmark just down the road in Lubbock. With Cliff Parks and Agrilogic and College Station, the new weed cap crop insurance policy is out now as well. And so there's a whole litany of risk management tools. They're either coming down the pipe or already have, and so be on the lookout for those. And I'm getting on my soapbox about going to, so I'm gonna pick up the pace here. We don't have to worry about this one. In terms of the 18 Farm Bill, just to give you a sense where it ended up. At the end of the day over here in conference, it ended up being a budget neutral bill. Okay, and it partly sets the stage for this next, because in 18, was there any new money to write that Farm Bill? No. What happened after 28? Give me a couple or one world event that happened after 2018. Anybody remember a little pandemic that came along, right? No, so in 2018, we've survived, we're in the midst of the Trump trade war. Okay, I also happen to be the trade guy, chairman. That was a very interesting time. And spent a lot of time on this, and it was crazy. But if you were kind of sick and tired of status quo, it was a lot of fun. But challenging. It was a great time. But it was also chaotic. And so, but the administration stepped in with aid, right? And so the Farm Bill, it didn't really matter. Did a Farm Bill anticipate a trade war? No. The safety net wasn't going to anticipate a trade war, but the administration stepped in. And so you get to 2018, and it's largely a status quo bill. There was no new money. Granted, we were in a recession, but the 14 Farm Bill helped soften the blow, other than for cotton, but we had just fixed cotton, right, in the bipartisan budget act. And so it was a pretty status quo bill. Now you start to get to 2023 and what's happened. We've had a pandemic where what's happened to costs of production has exploded. Is anybody interested in just status quo now? No, because you've got a lot more exposure out there. Well, you've got a lot more that you're putting on the line, grow a crop, raise cattle, whatever it may be. And so there's a lot of interest in making sure that the safety net catches up with where constant production is. And so the 18 bill, though, was budget neutral. We're now in an environment where we need more money if we're going to write a bill. And as you can imagine, that might be a little bit of a touchy subject. So the other last one is, if you're not familiar with any of this stuff in terms of safety net, I mentioned those two things, Title I of the Farm Bill, crop insurance. We kind of put them under the same umbrella as the farm safety net. Crop insurance is over here. Traditional farm policy, I mentioned the marketing loan, things like ARPA, PLC, and the title bill. Together we get comments all of the time, why do you have these two different things? Well, they're designed to work together. Crop insurance protects you during the growing season, period. It's here for this crop. How many of you are excited about growing $4 wheat or 65-cent cotton? Anybody can break even on that? No, that's why you have Title I. If you end up in this long run downturn, that's why Title I exists. Crop insurance follows the market, which is great for crop insurance. I mean, it works very well, and it's very popular. But when you're in a series of really low prices, it's still really important. But it's still, I mean, if you had to rely exclusively on insurance in that environment, you could end up losing insurance. And so that's why we have both of those tools together. And so it's that part on farm policy where I spend most of my time. For those of you who aren't interested in farm policy, I'm sorry, we're going to dive a little bit deeper on that one, because it's probably the most contentious part of this bill. So my old boss said this, he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. Farm bills are not written for the good times, they're written for the bad times. The challenge is they're often written in the good times, right? And I would hesitate to say, I mean, driven around a lot. I know all the cotton I just have released at home that looks awful. I'd hesitate to say that now is a good time. It's not a catastrophe. 83 cents, nothing to write home about on cotton, but 83-cent insurance on a disaster crop, like I can survive. To next year, it may be a little painful, but I can, I can make it work, so I don't want to imply that right now is a good time, but. You see some softening in costs, prices haven't gone completely in the tank, there's some encouraging signs on cotton prices. They keep hovering between 85 and 90, and who knows, they may tick up, right? But for the most part, we're not where we were, a few years ago when the market was completely in the tank. And so what's happening is, and this was a headline straight out of Hagstrom, it's slowed because of farm income. Well, the reality is, a lot of that's being driven by livestock, a lot of it's being driven by corn. So you get these policymakers in Washington who the signals they see coming out of USDA on farm income are the things, we're still at near record high farm income, right? You drill down to the farm level, it may not look nearly as rosy, right? You may have been suffering for years of drought and having all sorts of challenges. We know till at home, constant battle on trying to deal with, weed resistance, also and just beat your head against the wall constantly. And now, oh, and by the way, we're paying, 50% more for this tractor than the last one we bought, it just keeps compounding. And so, but the perception in DC is that things are okay. So I don't roughly be talking about making, add even more money to this, but that's the reality we're dealing with. Again, it's against the backdrop in 22 on cost of production. Part of the challenge was last year, it's all everybody was talking about, right? Fertilizer costs. And everyone who was talking to the policymaker was telling them about the cost of fertilizer and how it was going to do them in. And this farm bill's got to be reflective, of that. You got to beef up Arkin PLC because of the cost of fertilizer. Who's saying that now? The problem is Washington is not hearing that message now. Right? It's kind of quiet. And so we're expecting, the problem is, we're not writing it for the good times, we're writing it for the bad times in anticipation of the bad times. And prices, there's plenty of signals on the horizon that show prices could be coming down. So we're trying to get Congress to focus on the fact that this is a 5-year bill. It doesn't matter what it looks like now, how will this bill perform 5 years from now? That's the dynamic that we're struggling with right now. We've done a ton of work to try to help paint that picture for them. But then you've got these policymakers on the ag committees who then have to go convince it's kind of like back to the Prop 1 argument, right? We in ag are like, well, duh, this is a no-brainer. But go convince people who are, try to convince people who aren't in ag. And it's a much bigger challenge, which it's different.
It's looking like, are you seeing significant price drops for the next 5 years, or what's gonna happen with prices and costs?
No, and let me come back to that in just a second. So to finish up on this Prop 1, Oklahoma, I farm there, couldn't get the constitutional amendment for right to farm. But we did legalize medical marijuana production. So we can't pass the right to farm amendment, but we can get all the votes for medical marijuana. And now guess what we've got? We've got more marijuana farmers than we have real farmers in the state. Literally, I've seen finalized the letter to the state regulator said there are now more documented marijuana farms than there are crop production farms in the entire state of Oklahoma. The proliferation has been insane. So, politics is crazy. It's weird. And
We're gonna be a loss.
number, not aggregated, but the number of individual people claiming to be farmers. Yes. Yeah, no, good question. So, okay, Dee Dee, back to the question. What was the point you're raising? Okay, so for the long-term projections. No, if you look at, what we end up doing, our partners at FAPRI, Food and Agriculture Research Institute of Missouri, they do stuff, surprise projections. We then pull all that into our model to look at a farm level projection, farm level income projections, farm level network projections. And it's pretty darn stable. Okay, the outlooks are pretty darn stable. I think the problem is we know, any number of things can blow that out of the water, right? Another one we're watching very closely because, and you get into all these regional battles when you start talking about Farm Bill. There's an outfit in Illinois who constantly, somehow they think they're experts on cotton production, and there's not any cotton production in Illinois. But the University of Illinois opines on cotton policy all the time. Why? Because they treat politics as a zero-sum game, right? And so, there's all of these constant regional battles. Well, corn, and we have corn in West Texas, but if you look at the I states who love, declaring political war, they feel like they don't have much to lose, right? I mean, they control most of the market, like we can roll the dice, it does, this stuff doesn't really matter. Whereas you look at cotton, quite the opposite, we're at the mercy of exporting 75% of crop, rice over 1%. Of global production, but even for corn, you've got to look at how that dynamic is shifting. It's shifting significantly. Our market share, we've lost 10%. Over the last decade, right? Because particularly as a result, and other competitors pick up steam. So even for other parts of the country, this stuff is becoming increasingly important. And so anyway, I mean, it's a pretty stable outlook, but like the corn example I just gave, depending on the direction Brazil goes and what China does on the demand front, I mean, it could significantly influence it, right? Where all of a sudden you've got corn in the doldrums, and a lot of the crops end up following that too. So the outlook's pretty stable. But again, therein lies the challenge, because the conversation we're trying to have in Congress is like that. If that's the case, if it's stable, guess what? This isn't gonna spend anything, and that's okay. It's not intended. At least the last decade, these are not intended to be subsidies. It's risk management. So if prices are pretty robust, you don't get anything from the government, and that's by design. But the counter to that also has to be true, that if it's bad, it needs to pay. And the problem is, it can fall pretty darn far right now. I would argue well below your cost of production, it's not gonna pay a dime without significant improvements. Those are the conversations that we have right now. So zoom through here pretty quickly, right? Reference prices haven't kept up with the cost of doing business. The other one, things like Arca PLC, they pay on base acres. Some of y'all may have base acres in this room. Some of you may be really mad about base acres because you don't have them. Your farm has a few base acres, but you're farming a lot more than that. And part of this is because, we moved to, arguably we did this to be trade compliant. We don't want farmers chasing payments from the government. So we're not you can't plant for the program. It's gonna be based on what you have as historical acres. So on paper, it makes a lot of sense. In the trade world, it makes a lot of sense. In reality, it means over time you can get really behind, right? To the point where your operation doesn't look remotely like what you have base acres. So we hear that complaint a lot. Hear the complaint that payment limits are outdated. I'll tell you, I've had multiple conversations with staffers. And it goes like this. Anybody know the payment limit for our PLC? 250 combined, right? So the individual limit is 125,000. And you're talking to a bunch of Hill staffers sitting around the room, none of whom make 125,000. Okay, and so they're all advising their bosses, and they're hearing from a bunch of whiny farmers who are complaining that the payment they're getting from the government's not big enough when it's bigger than my entire salary. Like, those are the conversations, and this is the disconnect between the countryside and Washington, right? That's the kind of, I've literally heard those arguments. So then we have to sit down and we have to start, backing up a little bit. And I said, okay, now, what did you put at risk? Other than driving on the Beltway in Washington DC, and putting your life at risk, what else did you what capital did you put at risk? Well, no, I'm a salary worker. I'm like, okay, well, what if you're the farmer? To get the 125, they only get the 125 if there's a loss that warrants it. And how much are they putting at risk to make it? If you're at 125, maybe $1 million you're putting at risk, right? And so they're putting $1 million at risk, and all of a sudden light bulbs start going on. This is again, it's no different than the Trump. It's all an information asymmetry problem, right? It is that people didn't grow up with this, but the way our Congress works, our system of government works, lay people who are elected to Congress vote on these things, and their staffs go advise them. So it's a big challenge. It's why groups like Farm Bureau, think on the political side are so incredibly, they're a political force in these. They were the #1 force that helped us get the 18 Farm Bill done. Another that is increasing reliance on ad hoc assistance, right? So one school of thought here on all this is if we can't do anything to make any improvements here, well, we've been getting ad hoc assistance, but we could just keep getting it. The problem is, what's the appetite for spending in Washington right now? Not very high, right? So my worry is that this is starting, particularly you get away from the pandemic, there's still going to be hurricane relief, so on and so forth, but the days of ad hoc assistance are somewhat known. I think another part of the problem is there's a lot of frustration. You take ERP for last year, but has it gone out yet? ERP for 22? No, ERP for 2022. It still hasn't even gone out yet. So we're talking about a disaster last year, still hasn't even gone out. And I give FSA a really hard time, but it's mainly the leadership. It's not these ladies, because they do great work. But political leadership makes these decisions, right? So you get this growing frustration that's like, well, what's the point of this ad hoc stuff? It was a disaster from a year ago, and we still don't even have it. And oh, by the way, I mean, the idea that you need to help small farmers, so it's gonna be limited to $2,000. I mean, in our part of the world, so if you're trying to manage, you know how far $2,000 goes in a commercial. If you're doing this as a living, how far does $2,000 go? Nowhere, right? I mean, you can't even think about getting started. So it's another area where it's out of touch, right? But that's a political decision from the current administration. So you have all these things swirling around. We always hear don't screw up crop insurance. That's always in the mix too. So one of the areas we're focused on is on reference prices, statutory reference prices. These are the ones that are set by Congress, primarily for the price less coverage program. They're set in statute. We did a thing in 18. I remember I got all sorts of grief looked at like I lost my mind. We put this provision in the 18 bill. And it was if market prices flowed up, mine should have been a 5-year recession. If prices flowed up, the reference prices can also float up with it up to 15%. Again, when people bought it, they looked at me like I had a horn going in my head. And little and hold actually work pretty darn well. Not for every crop, but a lot of crops, their CEO reference prices already significantly adjusted. So that's one of the debates right now. Is do we even need to be raising reference prices? I argue still yes, because not every crop is benefiting from this. And two, even these effective reference prices can come back down. So I think Congress has to be looking at raising statutory reference prices in this bill. But look at these numbers. If you raise it 20%, which I argue is probably the area that you can be targeting if you want it to be relevant, what does that cost? 55 billion to 60 billion. Y'all remember what the entire baseline for Title I was in that slide? About that amount. So look at it, doubling the budget for Title I to be able to make some of these changes. It starts to send people to heads up in Washington, D.C. The other thing is, well, what about changes to the reference price calculation? Just to illustrate this very quickly, I think you have it in front of you. It's nasty and very messy. But on the left-hand side, that's the pricing statute. The one over on the right is the far right is 115% of that. The numbers in the middle are the effective reference price calculations, which is 85% of the 5-year review average price. So we're looking at one market or specific market prices. And so if they went up by more than 15%, they're red. If they went up, but not by 15%, they're green. And if they're black, they didn't go up. They didn't go up at all. They're still below the statutory price. And so it gives you a sense of what the effective reference price calculation formula has done. What did it do? And it has done, stuff for crops in our area, like sorghum, for example, goes up to, we're talking 395 in statute going up to 454 and capping out 4 years. So even without a farm bill, it is true because of effective reference prices are going to go up for the next couple of years for these crops. So if you're growing sorghum, that's the case. Corn's the case. Wheat is the case as well. I'd argue they're still not high enough, but they are going up. What about cotton? The market hasn't pulled them up there, right? So they're still at 36.7 in statute, right? And so just be leery when you hear people talking about, well, this effective reference price thing. And that was another article Illinois wrote this week with Congress as their audience. So don't worry about raising reference prices because you have effective reference price. Well, if all you're focused on is moment soybean country, maybe so, but if you're concerned about just the country, not so much. So another is on base acres. We're looking at a whole litany of potential changes there. One thing I've been looking at, I think could be in the offing. The challenge with base is that you're asking Congress, well, literally saying, deciding what acres are you going to get paid on. Well, what are the chances Congress could screw that up? Pretty darn good, right? Or at least not know the implications. So like if they change how they do this, are they going to know how to impact you? No, not necessarily, right? They're not going to go look at every farmer's file in every county office, right? And so the problem is they make these changes. When do members of Congress find out whether it worked or not? When really angry people show up at town hall meetings. They don't like that. So what ends up happening, we kick the can on base acres. In 14, we did a reallocation that was voluntary. You could just reshuffle the decks, right? If your base, you couldn't add more base, but you could update it to be more reflective of the crop, proportionate to the crops that you had planted. The problem is for the grower that doesn't have any base, that's no conservation, right? So one area we've been exploring is could there just be a pot of funding set aside for the grower that's either has no base or significantly under base? Could that pot of funding be used to help establish base in those operations? That is something we can explore. A whole litany of others there if y'all want to talk about it, we can. And I'm gonna zoom through to finish up here. Means testing, actively engaged. We're doing a lot of work on this too. I argue one of the problems, we've made it so hard. There's a cottage industry in DC about deciding who is and isn't a farmer. Who's actively engaged, who's not. And then we heard earlier the average age of the farm. Who we know increasingly it's harder and harder to come back to the farm and keep it going because it costs so much money. And if you want to do it full time, you about have to have another job to cash flow. But if you want to do it full time, you gotta have the capacity to take on a huge amount of risk. You look at these payment limits, they're not reflective of it. And oh, by the way, if your butt's not in the tractor seat, are you really actively engaged or not? Can you really qualify if you're not actually in a tractor seat? Well, do you have to be a tractor?
I'm just
seat?
gonna, we have enough steak, I can do that.
I'd argue no. Like,
We don't have enough steak.
And I know quite well that I'm farming, I watch it and I don't spend nearly, I mean, even my dad, before his granddad, does not spend a whole lot of time in tractor seat. There's a lot of it a sprayer, but not in tractor seat. And so there's just this messed up definition of who is and isn't a farmer in Washington DC or DC. It's well intended, right? It's to keep people.
I can cut down the recipe, what it'll make.
I did a bill the other day for the Republican Study Committee in Capitol. There were like 50 members of Congress in there. And it was with some crazy economist from one of the groups that attacks farmers. They had us debate each other for all of these amendments. And one of the biggest things that came out, I won't say member, but she ends up, she's a bit of a firebrand and ends up on cable news all of the time. Railed in that briefing about Bill Gates getting farm tanks.
I just said, there's not enough steak to make prime rib soup, according to the recipe.
It's because it has like Bill Gates that we've layered all this stuff on.
How much we have and cut back.
I don't, God bless y'all for how y'all handle
what you want?
payment limit handbook alone, like, I mean.
Cut up
it's crazy.
and cut it up
the
and
stuff they have to
there
do.
is.
Because it's well intentioned, but then I look at it from the other side, what are the unintended consequences of all that?
Separate cream.
If you have all these kids who've left the farm, they may be trading commodities in Chicago. But what we told them is, look, you can't have any involvement with, I mean, if you want to have involvement with the farm, you can. But you can't participate, in any of these other, you can buy crop insurance for now. But you can't participate in any of these other programs because you're not actively engaged. Well, if you're the one at risk and putting all the capital up, like, why are we telling that kid that they can't be involved in farming? Why wouldn't we want that kid involved in farming operation instead of saying, no, only the ones that are right? I mean, to me, it's put us on this treadmill where the problem just keeps growing. Right? And so I think it's time to rethink about that.
No,
And we're trying to do,
You
we're
don't
doing a lot of work on it in our
that
center.
being
We'll see how
defined.
successful we are with it. I'll
No
skip
need,
this one
no
in the time and finish up here on budget chaos. It is chaos in Washington. This thing, y'all remember the debt ceiling that we talked about in the spring, the deal that McCarthy cut with the president to save 1.5 trillion, all that. We did our version of that 10 years ago when the debt ceiling had to be raised. Congress at that time agreed to come up with a committee to find 1.5 trillion savings. We did, I literally got married and started this new job and it's been 72 straight days writing farm. I was not very happy with me doing my new job at the time. But we did it, we got it done. Every other committee failed. And it became the precursor for what would be the 2014 Farm Bill 3 years later. But that effort failed. So think what you will about this one and how bad of a horrible of a deal it was that the McCarthy struck. They actually cut instead of going over the committee to go find it that failed. They came up with 1.5 trillion savings. My bigger problem with that bill was what did it do for agriculture, or what pathway did it lay for a farm bill? None. So you have this budget deal that sucks all the oxygen out of the room. Members are really worked up about how much money our country owes. And they came up with this deal, you know, we've got a farm bill sitting out there that's gonna need new money. It's gotta come from somewhere from the budget committee. We do have the chairman residing next door in Lubbock, the chairman of the House Budget Committee, Mr. Arrington. Right, so I mean, we have leadership in place that can be helpful there, but that deal that was cut had nothing for, and I think that's part of the challenge we're up against right now. We in ag know there's improvements that need to be made in a farm bill. It's against this backdrop of, well, the deal's already cut, and now, and we think that was not enough, and we need to be cutting even more. The question I have is, you know, we're sitting over here. If you think back to 02, 60 billion was added in 02 to write that bill. Why? It followed years of ad hoc spending. This is Mr. Convest's bill. Love it. It followed years of ad hoc spending. He made the argument to Congress that instead of all this unbudgeted stuff, you know, that comes after the fact and doesn't work, let us write the bill we need to write. We are in that exact same boat right now. But this is not happening. And what has happened is the last 5 years, there's been over 90 billion poured into agriculture and ad hoc assistance, CFAP, ERP, WHIP, all of those programs. My concern is they're drying up. What happens if they dry up? Farm bill needs to work, right? But for the farm bill to work, you gotta have an additional infusion. Again, the big budget deal they had earlier this year laid no pathway for that. And so you've got the ag committees who are kind of sitting there stuck, not knowing what to do. But they know what they want to do, they don't know how to actually get it done. That's the backdrop on debt. That's where I came in as a staff, 10 trillion in debt held by the farm. And it was hair on fire for years. We cut 23 billion in farm bill because of that, because the country owes so much money. It's now 26 trillion. It was 10. It's now 26 trillion. How do you write a farm bill in that environment? I mean, it just shows you what they're up against. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not me piling on them. They have enormous challenges that they're trying to navigate. You're bringing it back to the pie charts. Why do I bring it up here? My frustration is that we come to ag all the time asking for cuts. We did it in 14, in 18 it was budget neutral. Right? When ag needs an improvement, well, but the country owes a lot of money. Well, you can take our money for cuts, but when we need it, we can't add to. And part of the trouble is this, the thing I didn't mention earlier, I mean, look at the components. And granted, none of you, I won't ask for a show of hands for how many of you want the government revisiting Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, but they're 2/3 of the total budget. Almost all that mandatory spending is on autopilot. The farm bill every 3 years or every 5 years. We do it every 5 years, right? We cut. Presumably we can add to, but the problem is the federal government is on autopilot. All of the mandatory spending is on autopilot, and a farm bill comes with that offer every 5 years. It's also then why we get to the floor. And you have amendments to eliminate crop insurance, like, well.
Listen to class.
That's stupid idea come from, like, who in their right mind would think it's a good idea to eliminate crop insurance? Well, if the government's on autopilot and you care about that previous slide with the debt, you got to take votes where you can, and this is the bill that's moving. And so we do this every 5 years, where you go to the floor and you have, unless you got, I mean, we had Mike Conaway. Thankfully, we had 50 amendments ruled in order to beat every single one. We want every single amendment to make. But it is crazy. If you've got members, leadership who don't know how to navigate that process, one amendment, suddenly you've got a crop insurance, right? And so the rest of the government's not like that though. So I mean, in my view, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Like, it's ag support now. Now's the time to do it in this bill in anticipation of the next 5. But the problem is, this is how the process really works, and it makes it enormously challenging. I think this is the one, Dee Dee, where I said I'd get back to yours. If you look at all that spending, then the 4 big buckets. What makes this one even more unique is that crop insurance down here. I hear it all the time. People come into our office. You gotta get this farm bill to that crop insurance. Crop insurance is permanent law. If you never had another farm bill, you would have crop insurance.
That doesn't happen very often.
Crop insurance back in 1980. It's permanently authorized. What about SNAP? Isn't appropriated in.
Most of our
You never had another farm bill, the appropriators were just funded. What about conservation? We gotta have a farm bill to get conservation. Nope, the president's signature legislation last fall, the Inflation Reduction Act, reauthorized the conservation program in 2031. What's left?
love you too, bye.
certainly a few other things like the trade programs I mentioned, there's other programs that are left. But the only one with money, any significant money, right there. CCC price support related activities, Title I of the Farm Bill. And so my argument is unless we see big improvements there, why not? Because we're gonna have to take a bill to the floor to survive all of these amendments. The price of entry on it's gotta be worth it, you know, what the benefit we're getting out of Title I improvement, it's gotta be worth it to be able to run the other units on the floor. And to Dee's point, look over here on SNAP. These are just various baselines. That's the one the 18 Farm Bill was written to. This was earlier this year. This is the latest one. This Farm Bill's the Farm Bill budget. 18 was 867 billion. What is this one? 1.48 trillion. You're spending 1.48 trillion on farmers on a farm bill? No, SNAP went up 84% since last time. Of that amount, Congress didn't even say a word. In this amount here, this plus 559 billion, certainly a lot of that was pandemic response, right? The market with prices pulling the SNAP benefits up. But another piece of it was the Biden administration made one unilateral change to change the market basket that they use for determining the SNAP benefit. And it resulted in a $254 billion increase in SNAP. 254 billion is sort of again from USDA. Okay. And so now we're having to against all that other backdrop, now Congress is also having to move, you know, the first ever $1 trillion+ farm bill that's 83% SNAP. Pretty tall order, huh? Yeah, big time. So we're all, you know, does that leave us then? You have Stabenow, who's retiring, saying no new money. Her interests are in a lot of things other than row crop country. Okay, so no new money for Title I. Bozeman, who is saying Farm Bill must address reference prices. And if it weren't for that debate, I think this ship would already be sailed. That it is that sort of the thing to watch for is at some point the members get so fatigued, and like you've got a bulldog and they're dealing with it, they get so tired of dealing with this, they start looking for the exit doors. And it's, well, if we just make some concessions here, some concessions there, and we don't and acknowledge we don't have any new money, well, then we can just tie a bow on this thing and let it ride on another bill, and you got a farm bill for the next 5 years. But if your farm bill doesn't work, what's the point? Right, and that's the debate that's happening right now. And it's playing out most prominently between those two people, which is scary to me because the Senate is often not the place that holds the line, but to his credit, John Bozeman has. And I think had he not been holding the line on making improvements to Title I, this bill, you know, would already be potentially had already gone that way. And I'm worried that eventually, if he's the only one, if he's feeling the pressure of holding out, that he too is going to get to a point where he feels like that he just can't hold out anymore. And the problem is they're not hearing from the country's side. And so if he doesn't feel like he has backing to hold out, you know, that may be the way we get a bill. I'd argue it is not the bill you should want, if that ends up happening. So last couple things here, Dee. I know I've gone almost a full hour here.
So we'll be
50 minutes.
7:30.
So, all right, so 3 slides on politics. Getting a 218 in the House. Why do you need 218 in the House? 218 votes. Simple majority in the House, there's 435 members, you need half rounded up, so 218 gets you there. And if you look at that chart from Bloomberg, you've got 4 or 5, you know, depending on which seats are full or not. You got a 4 or 5 vote margin in the House. I mean, it was crazy getting a bill done in 14 and 18. It took 14 bill took us 3 years. They've been at it less than 1. It took us 3 years to get it done because of politics, and we had a 17 vote margin. They got 4. How in the world do you navigate that? And then on top of it, you layer in, and you probably can't see it, and maybe you can see it in a handout. This is a buddy of mine, Dave Wasserman with Cook Political Report. They do all the prognostication on the races. That chart there across the bottom is where is their current outlook for the House. So you got 170 solid Democrat seats, 188 solid Republican seats. And I'm bad, despite being an ag econ professor, bad at math and fly, so what's that leave us, 70-ish plus seats? That are somewhat competitive. And so if you're a member of Congress and thinking about legislation that is and isn't moving, and thinking about your race and party politics, well, like, there's one huge giant gray area right in the middle, and it happened to us in 18. I mean, we got to March of 18, and we had been working with our Democrat counterparts. And suddenly they were no longer interested. Why? Largely because the polls were indicating they were in 18, which they did. That was a lot of fun. They won in November of 18. President Trump signed that bill on December 20th. So literally, they won on November, in the first week of November. Republicans lost after 8 years. We then got to tell our staff that 50% of you are going to be out of a job, but we need you to stay around, go for the next 2 months to finish this thing up, which every single one of them did. And then half of the people had to go. And it's like, okay, I mean, for the people who like, that's their livelihood in the middle, it was chaotic. Every single one of them stayed around. That's where we're at right now. I mean, the prospect of the House flipping yet again. And so then that does squirrely things to the psychology in the House of our Republicans want to work with Democrats. Why did, what's his name, the minority leader in the House, King Jeffrey, why didn't he bail McCarthy out? The speaker voted. Maybe that. He's got a chance to be speaker come January. I mean, there's other reasons. That's not the only one, but that's certainly part of the calculus, right? I mean, and just the same, why would McCarthy have pushed back against the prospect of working with the Democrats? Because he's having he was held hostage by his right flank. But he's also thinking about keeping the House in November too. So you have all of that stuff at play, which all culminates here. My points on path forward is, I believe pretty strongly that without significant improvements in this bill, what's the point of moving on? And you have a lot of leadership in Congress. And we don't have press in the room, so I'll just be very blunt. Like, their job is to get farm bill done. And there's plenty of members who don't care what's in it. It's their job to get one of them. And I think that is dicey and dangerous, because you don't just need one done, you need one done that works. And if it doesn't work, and then you still have to take it to the floor, you run the gauntlet of amendments that can make you could be far worse off from having taken that farm bill to the floor, depending if you're going to lose the amendment rate. A perfect indicator, the ag approach bill. They tried it in July, hundreds of amendments were filed, crazy all over the board amendments. They couldn't even get out of the rules committee, but the rules vote on it wouldn't even pass. And then when McCarthy, before being ousted, got a few of these appropriations bills done, guess which one he didn't get done? The ag approach bill, because there was too much frustration about the cuts that had been. They couldn't even get a 1-year ag approach bill done. How did you get an omnibus multi-year farm bill in that environment, right? And so where we are right now then is that if someone says they know the path forward, they're lying to you. No one has a clue. We're in completely uncharted territory right now with the speaker's race. And how are they, the people I'm watching right now is the New York delegation, the moderates that McCarthy helped get elected. Because they could do the same thing to the next guy that Gates and crew and Freedom did to McCarthy. And they're not, that person is not going to get the speaker's vote without making them happy, in my view. And so, do any of these candidates get the required votes they need to become speaker? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows right now. Because, and who knows what other deals are going to get cut behind the scenes to help make that happen. But it has thrown everything into chaos. Every single friend of mine who works on Capitol, none of them know what's happening, where this is all going. They just put their head down and they're going to keep putting together a bill. I suspect they probably have a farm bill largely written. They just have no clue how it's going to play out. Another question I get a lot then, particularly from conservative country, and I work for Republicans the whole time in Congress, is let's just do a partisan bill. Y'all did it in 18, we did a partisan bill in 18, got it done. Again, we had 16 vote marks at that time. They got 4, a lot of whom are moderates who are not going to get reelected if something crazy. And so you just The partisan political game right now is completely different, and I don't know how you cobble together the works for partisan bill. It's why McCarthy, Thompson, all of them in the House have talked about bipartisan farm bills for months now. There's going to be I literally did a lunch 2 months ago with the speaker sitting from me to you, and I heard the words come straight out of his mouth, and this is going to be a bipartisan farm bill. So it's coming straight from the speaker. Problem is, he's no longer speaker. And so it makes practical sense that it can be bipartisan, but then you also have a race coming. So like, and then, oh, the irony, so you have all that happening. Plus, if you do try to do bipartisan, and the motion to vacate is still there, could they just bring it up again, get the next speaker out if they don't like the problem? And so, I mean, we're in a very weird time right now where our country, like by design, it's supposed to be messy. I mean, the framers intended it that way. Democracy is not remotely efficient, but it's very active. If you want efficiency, Xi Jinping from China is your guy. I mean, they can get stuff done quicker. How equitable is it? I don't know, ask people in person, right? I mean, I'm serious. And so we decry how messy the US is. It's not remotely efficient. But all of that chaos is intended to help slow things down. The problem is, like, we've reached a whole new level where it's almost completely dysfunctional, right? And there's gonna come a time where we need to actually function. Maybe crises have a way of making, of breaking things loose, and maybe that's what will happen. Maybe it's Israel. No one wants to get on the wrong side of that boat, being accused of killing Israel in the midst of a war. So maybe that breaks things. Who knows? Another one I'm watching then is, what about this? I laugh, and some of you may love some of the folks who saw themselves on TV a lot last week. But I laugh a lot at the speech or the amendment rebuttal from Congressman Yates. After he filed the motion, they were debating, because his argument is we've got to get away from these continuing resolutions, and we've got to get back to single topic bills. Where we're just voting on one thing at a time, right? Does that sound? I mean, it sounds perfectly reasonable, right? I mean, I 100% agree with it too. What do you think the result of that little exercise last week is going to be? Well, one, there's not even a framework now where in which you can debate single topics. But because they can't find the votes to do anything, they can't even find the votes to get a speaker in place. What's likely to happen? Everything's going to get rolled up into one giant crazy big bill because they don't have the votes to do all this stuff in addition. So the irony is all this chatter about how improvements are going to be. Just watch, and I would love to be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I don't think I'm going to be. And we're going to end up having a big omnibus bill. Why am I watching it? Because it's not unprecedented for me. 1996 went something similar to this. And so we're in this weird environment where, who knows, everybody's whining, decrying a trillion plus dollar omnibuses at the end of the year. What's a $1.3 trillion farm bill to put in it too? And it just gets loaded up on it as well and goes. And I guarantee for folks who are really frustrated in Washington right now, who want, to flip their head down and get farm bill done, I'm pretty certain they're going to be looking at that avenue. And is it good governance? No, but their argument's going to be none of the rest of this nonsense is either. Neither is the federal government being modified. So their job is to get farm bills done. And so and that's the last one I believe is that I had helpful suggestions every single day on how we should do farm bills. And one of them is we split. Nutrition was pulled out. We lost a vote. I think the first time in history, farm bill went down with defeat in 2013. That was not a fun day. We split them apart, ran them separately as partisan bills through the House. And oh my goodness, we would never have another farm bill again. The sky was falling and we destroyed the alliance and this, that, and the other. And guess what? 2 months later, they were married back up and we were conferencing. So my encouragement is to not worry about all the mess and nonsense in DC. It has a way of sorting itself out. I think more important than anything right now is communicating why this stuff matters, why these tools matter, and insisting on improvement. So with that, I'm finished, other than our promo for Soda Active Day. If you haven't signed up, we have 13 states have banded together in response to the outfit of Illinois, even though this is not technically in response to the outfit in Illinois. It pretty much is. 13 southern states have gone together and found Southern Act of Days and the comes out, so. We love having sign that it's free. Joe and I post almost every Thursday. Thursdays are our policies. And we write on all these topics on Thursdays.
It's a lot of good stuff, and it's relatively short, like 3 paragraphs.
Oh, yeah, unlike me running on for 55 minutes or an hour, it is 2 paragraphs. So it's very quick and to the point so that you can read it and read it.
Now, any questions for Mark? So I guess I'm not gonna see Justin anytime soon.
I saw someone earlier tonight, I'm there, he's after the speaker implosion, called saying, if you checked in on Justin, I'm like, he's been there like 7 months, I'm gonna call him after 3 years and see how he's doing. So, no, Justin's doing great, but I have a feeling he's not coming home anytime terribly soon. So sorry, BB, you're still stuck doing meetings.
You need to go to January.
Lots of meetings in January.
January's good. Sure, so we have a lot of cotton farmers here that, they did not have cotton base in 2002 when they could do the massive updates, and then 14 when they could reallocate, cotton was not included. And so then 18, it was only for the guys who already had cotton. So a lot of my cotton farmers have no cotton base just because of the way the bill was written. If they update base acres, do you think they'll be able to add some?
Well, if they would have been able to pick up cotton base in 14, they would have been able to pick.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, the problem goes back even further to 2002, right? Like, 'cause it is, no, it's just still this perennial problem. If you don't have base, there has not been an opportunity to add it. Other than for soybeans, to do with that, because you cover quantity. So no, that's where we're at right now. And the challenge is it's just a question of funding, right? I mean, if there's no new money for Title I, you don't do any of this. You don't raise reference prices, you don't address base, you don't do any of it. And so on that idea I had mentioned, I think there's 2 ways you could approach it. You could I'm loath to just hand the secretary pots of money because you can establish base as long as you fund 2.5 acres, right? Like, I mean, that's just the bizarre environment we're in right now, right? And so I think Congress is probably gonna like, if they do this, we need to write the rules. And it's, they just declare that if you have a farm, an FSA, farm serial number, an FSN, that with no base on it, then you're eligible to add, a certain amount. It's probably not gonna be fully based, but to start whittling at the problem. And the problem at CBO, Congressional Budget Office, that does all the cost estimates, is this cycle, for whatever reason, is extremely slow, and so they're very behind. So I don't know if they're exploring those concepts, but that would be one, is if you have no base at all, you're able to add, let's say 50%. The other though is chronically under base, but I mean, you're planting 1,000 acres, but you only got 250 acres base, which is 75% in. Should you qualify for this too, right? So it all comes back to money. But do they have the money? If they were able to get an infusion, the Title I, they could do some of this. And one of the biggest debates right now, it's over on the NRCS side of the house, is the Inflation Reduction Act added 20 billion in authorization of climate smart provisions. Well, there's a debate right now about clawing that back and say, well, can it be used in time instead of incentives and under circumstances. But now there's a debate of, well, what about, could it be used to build eco backbone? I mean, eco services for people. And so, you can spend a lot of money on eco and not necessarily on climate smart stuff. We have eco stuff, climate smart anyway, so why not just focus on, pipeline where you have. So that debate is happening. I mean, it's not new from, it's not zero infusion Title I.
Mark, I appreciate it.
Thank you.